Deborah Blando began her international career with a trajectory that suggested global superstardom. Born in Italy and raised in Brazil, her early exposure to different cultures shaped her musical identity. In the early 1990s, she signed with Virgin Records and released A Different Story, an English-language pop album aimed at the global market. The album included tracks like Boy, Why Do You Want to Make Me Blue, and Innocence, which received airplay in Europe, Asia, and Latin America. Her image was carefully constructed to compete with rising global stars, and her multilingual skills made her a strong contender on the international stage. However, despite the early buzz and international exposure, her global career did not sustain its momentum. Markets outside Brazil were saturated with similar pop acts, and without the aggressive backing often reserved for US-based artists, Blando's exposure was limited. She was positioned as a crossover artist, but was unable to secure the long-term international presence that her debut promised. Meanwhile, in Brazil, her music became a staple of the national pop rock scene. Tracks from her debut album were featured in Brazilian soap operas, one of the most influential platforms for music exposure in the country. Her 1997 album Unicamente, recorded in Portuguese, solidified her local fame. Songs like Unicamente and Somente o Sol became national hits, earning her regular rotation on Brazilian radio and television. She was nominated for awards and performed at major events, becoming a recognizable figure in Brazilian pop culture. Unlike international markets, Brazil maintained a strong memory of her work. Even as the global music industry moved on, Brazilian fans continued to associate her music with defining cultural moments of the 1990s and early 2000s. Deborah Blando was not just another imported pop act in Brazil. She was one of the few to genuinely bridge the language and market divide. Her transition from international English pop to deeply personal Portuguese music resonated more in Brazil than anywhere else. As the 2000s progressed, Blando's output slowed. Personal challenges, including her struggle with mental health, contributed to her gradual retreat from the spotlight. Her condition remained undisclosed during her peak, and only years later did she reveal her diagnosis of bipolar disorder. This had impacted her consistency, decision-making, and ability to maintain a high-pressure global career. The international music industry, often indifferent to the personal struggles of artists outside the US and Europe, did not offer the support Blando needed to sustain her presence. Without constant releases and active promotion, her name faded from global charts and media. Her identity as a Brazilian-Italian artist, while unique, did not translate into lasting international branding, especially during a time when industry systems were less inclusive and more risk-averse. In contrast, Brazil never forgot. Her music remained embedded in national playlists, nostalgic TV segments, and streaming platforms targeting Brazilian audiences. Radio stations continued to play her 90s hits, and interviews with her drew interest even during her long absences. Fans in Brazil followed her sporadic returns, whether through spiritual music projects, brief performances, or social media posts. Her career trajectory became part of broader discussions about mental health, fame, and the Brazilian music industry's treatment of its stars. Deborah Blando is frequently mentioned in Brazilian retrospectives on influential pop acts. Her early success and later challenges form a case study in the divergence between international and domestic celebrity. Globally, she became a footnote, another promising act who didn't break through. But in Brazil, she remained a cultural reference point, both for her musical contributions and the complex narrative that followed her rise. The world forgot Deborah Blando because it never fully understood her. Brazil remembered because it lived her story in real time. The songs, the voice, and the personal journey stayed relevant in the country that embraced her not just as a product of pop, but as an artist with depth, talent, and a history worth preserving.